What is going on, Badger fans? Great episode today. Great guest as always with John Garcia Jr. We're going to talk some recruiting news, a five-star prospect coming to Madison for a visit. Let's talk about it and more on Wisconsin. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings, as always. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in for a special live show with John Garcia Jr., Locked On's Recruiting Insider. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. And let's bring John Garcia Jr. on, as always, Locked On's Football Recruiting Insider. John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Ryan. Thanks for having me on and giving me the big boy seat for the live show. Let's go.
Let's do it. People were excited about the last one. I kind of sprung this on folks, so not just folks, also on John. So we'll see who shows up. But either way, man, we got a lot to talk about. I wanted to start here. David Stone, five-star defensive end, IMG. Everyone knows that high school. 2024 kid, 6'4", 270. And he has the buffet of blue blood offers. Basically, every school that you can think of has offered him. He's coming to Madison for a visit. There's a family connection there. Let's start with, does Wisconsin even have a chance here before we get into his game?
He's talking about an official visit to Wisconsin. So to me, that's an absolute yes. Now, look, David is a well-traveled kid. I literally joked with him about it. He's been to, I think, every school in the country. It's not really that much, but he's been to 15 or so schools already. He's trying to get out to USC. He's making return trips to Michigan State and Oklahoma this week again. He is a very well-traveled recruit, but yeah, he's got ties to a lot of different programs, right? He grew up in Oklahoma. You mentioned he's got some family members in the state of Wisconsin, and his mom at one point thought about moving him up there, which I think would probably have increased Wisconsin's chances. But look, this isn't a shot in the dark, even though so many schools are in the mix. You know, you start talking official visits, you start talking family connections, and yeah, it's an underdog and mountain to climb scenario for Wisconsin. But the more David continues to consider other schools, the more clear it is that he's going to take his time with the process. So those elements are very good for Wisconsin. We know they're recruiting at a higher clip. They've got a higher ceiling nationally. And I think this is going to be another one of those important case studies. You know, does he get through that official visit and then reassess where Wisconsin stands in this race? But to grab one of only 5 official visits from that kid is a very big deal because, again, 15 schools right now, Ryan, feel like they've got a puncher's chance. Only 5 can grab an official visit. So if Wisconsin truly is locked in, that means only 4 of the remaining 14 or so are going to grab an official visit. So that alone tangibly puts Wisconsin in a very strong position for, you know, maybe the best defensive lineman in the class.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you that because, listen, moral victories are moral victories for a reason. You know, they're not necessarily translating. But is getting a 5-star defensive end from Florida, even with some family connections into Madison, is that a bit of a moral victory that you can say, you know, Wisconsin's at least starting to punch in these battles? You have to punch in them before you can knock somebody out, correct?
100%. You've got to get them on campus. I mean, that's really the next step for any of these programs trying to elevate from where they were from a recruiting standpoint. You got to secure visits and official visits, most importantly, right? Because now you're going to get the full impression. And I think as we stand right now, Ryan, I think Wisconsin's the only confirmed official visit for Stone. So that could potentially put you at that great position of the first official visit that we'll talk about as we get closer to the summer months. You know, so now you're talking about a whole different ball game. So yeah, you've got to crawl before you walk, punch before you knock somebody out for sure. But when you start talking official visit territory, yeah, this is a true tangible step in the right direction. But we've seen it through the portal, and we're starting to see it throughout this class of 24. Wisconsin's got its web widespread, and it's only going to get wider as we look at the home stretch or the bulk stretch of this 2024 cycle. But a David Stone comes with cachet. Absolutely. Look, it is what it is, right? You know, players using the program and vice versa. it comes with cachet, and not to mention digging in at IMG Academy. I mean, that alone, would be worth it for most programs, just sort of in general, independent of an individual or an individual recruitment.
Let's talk about the game then. Like, he is what I would picture on film, right? Like, when I saw the ranking, I saw he's 6'4", 270. This is a dude who doesn't need to put a lot of weight on. He can play right away, probably at a college level. What was your takeaways watching him on film and talking to people who know his game?
Oh man, he's so easy to like because he does a little bit of everything. You mentioned 6'4", 270, absolutely comfortable being too quick for a big physical guard or center prospect. He has no issue with his lateral movement and explosive first step. He has no issue getting around those guys. But here's the thing, at 270, he can absolutely line up outside and provide terror off of the edge. We don't want to put too much on these kids, but we saw Chris Jones do this for the Chiefs this year in his all-pro season at 300 pounds, working outside against tackles. David Stone has some of that in his game, but on top of it, he's got a motor and he's got a frame that's going to carry more weight. And he's kind of he's the classic outgoing defensive lineman, personality, the whole thing. So he's an ambitious kid, just like his visit schedule has been. But we see that when we go to watch him, not only as a defensive lineman, but just as a football player. I was at a camp last year in Orlando, probably 90 degrees, and David Stone was playing linebacker, covering running backs at 270. Like, he covered the number one running back in the country, Cedric Baxter, and he got beat, but he was in there, and he'll tell you, hey, I was in there. So this is an ambitious, athletic player with a competitive motor that is kind of always on. And there are certain positions where you need that. And obviously the focal point of your interior defensive line is absolutely one of them. So he's got all the production, all the numbers, all the measurables, but he's also got the mentality to go along with it. It's why I would imagine, I haven't looked, but I would imagine every outlet that covers recruiting is going to throw 5 stars on his name. He's just the type of kid that you're more willing to bet on. But where it counts most, Friday nights, there were flashes where he was the most dominant player, not just D lineman or defensive player, the most dominant player wearing an IMG Academy jersey at points last season. Anytime you're in that conversation, you're a dude and a half, if you will. So yeah, David's backed it up already, and I would imagine more of that is on the way this fall.
Yeah, I was watching some of the film of him. One of my favorite things about David's game is there was a clip on film where he stacked up 2 offensive linemen, strung a run out, and then ran down the running back in the open field, right? And you talked about some of that, the ability to play inside, outside, to do everything. A lot of 5-star prospects, just from a fan standpoint, they look like the 6'6", 210-pound freaks that run a 4.4, but you're not really sure what they're going to look like at 230, 240. Like, part of the appeal here is it's easy to picture him at the next level because he already looks like he's at the next level.
Right. And you're not asking your interior players to do what we did 10 or 15 years ago either, right? So even if for some reason he doesn't bulk up a bunch, right now he could still fill a situational role on any given defensive line. So yeah, I think that's a big important part of it. With the linemen, we don't want to get too creative or imaginative from a height and weight standpoint because you just don't know. You don't know how the body's going to transform or how much athleticism you can maintain when you do put on the weight. Not everybody's JJ Watt who just can throw on 60 pounds and be more athletic. That is a rarity of the highest form. So yeah, with guys like David Stone, we don't have to imagine very much.
Hey, I want to ask you this question, and this is more of a ballpark generalization question and not so much a David Stone question. We've seen price tags. Listen, NIL is a factor now. Like, that's not a secret for every major prospect. Mm-hmm. We've seen price tags for quarterbacks. Some of those have been leaked out there. We saw the Rashad, like the $13 million for, Rashad. Like, is there a market generalization? What does an elite defensive lineman cost from an NIL standpoint? I know that, listen, nothing with David Stone, just, are there numbers that have been floated out there for, in general, this prospect at this type of position?
Yeah, we've heard some ballparks for some recruits, not as crazy as quarterbacks as you would imagine, not even close, probably, as you would also imagine. But yeah, when you're again, arguably the number one defensive lineman. This is a premium position guy. I think those positions beyond quarterback's its own thing. The rest of them, you're talking left tackles, pass rushers, interior defenders, and corners. Those position groups are going to command sort of their own tier of NIL attention. And I'm sure, I can guarantee you, it's come up plenty with David Stone. So yeah, it's funky. It's something that we're still learning a whole lot about. And depending on, where he's at and the school he's considering on a given day, some of them can get into that conversation. Most of them cannot, so it's a slippery slope. So a lot of those kids sort of stay away from it individually, but they've got people who've got people that can go and get these ballparks. But yeah, we've heard plenty of 6-figure NIL opportunities for non-quarterbacks. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and it's weird because it feels like I'm asking a taboo question when it's really not a taboo thing anymore. Like, players are able to make money on their name, image, and likeness. I think it's a great thing that they can, but doesn't it still feel like we're talking about a bit of a taboo thing?
Yeah, because 10 years ago when a prospect made a commitment, the other fan base was like, "Oh, they just paid him." They gave him the bag, duffel bag or whatever it was, and that was always such a no-no to even bring up, right? So yeah, I understand how payment in general can start to feel taboo and feel like it's pushing in that direction. And we're still so early in the NIL window that we still don't know a lot about it. And it's unfortunately more cloudy because different states carry it their own way, different schools carry it their own way. Not everybody operates with a collective or a certain booster. I mean, it's all case by case almost. So that creates more angst when you do talk about it. But look, there's no doubt that it is absolutely prevalent and important to all of these elite recruits, the minority, the 1% that are going to be going through the process.
Yeah, that's great insight as always from John. All right, coming up, we're going to talk about an electric receiver, also from IMG, potentially coming to Madison. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers with John Garcia Jr. But first, today's show is brought to you by our very good friends, the number one sports book in America. You know who they are. It's FanDuel. We've partnered with them because they are the best. They are the industry leaders. And it's a great time to sign up. The NBA is kind of in the waning parts of its regular season. Playoffs are coming up. This is a great opportunity to get into FanDuel, especially with the no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. Then use it to bet on everything from the money line, point scores, three-pointers drained. I've talked about, everybody who listens to this show knows I'm a Suns diehard. That being said, I would bet on Milwaukee tonight, -1.5. The Suns without Durant coming off a tough back-to-back against Golden State. Yeah, I'm taking Milwaukee -1.5 tonight. Take that money, put that bet in. And then you can also do player props. You can combine it all to do same game parlays to make more money, win instantly. FanDuel is the industry standard for a reason. Exclusive bets that you can find nowhere else. And again, it's that same that no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets back. You're not going to find anything better anywhere out in the market. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And when you're done here, go grab your bracket, go listen to the Locked On College Basketball Bracket Breakdown, national analysis, insight from our local experts. Like you won't find this type of coverage anywhere else from every single team. Locked On internal experts coming on talking about their specific squads. Go get your Locked On College Basketball fix wherever you can find it on YouTube, wherever you can find it on the podcasts. All right, let's keep this going. John Garcia Jr., as always, really do appreciate it when he can jump on. And then we have some comments and questions to wrap the show up as well. John, as always, I want to give people the opportunity to figure out where they can follow you, where your platform is, because we are smarter because you're here.
Hey, I've gotten a few Badger fans and follows on social media, so appreciate you for leading them to me. Yeah, it's real simple. Just my name, John Garcia _JR on all social media, but yeah, mainly Twitter. If we're talking ball, let's talk ball on Twitter or here on Locked On, of course.
I love it, man. And we're going to segue into that. We talked IMG. We've been talking David Stone, another IMG player, receiver, kind of a borderline 4-star target. Jerrae Hawkins, a smaller, 5'9"-ish, 5'10"-ish, 165-pound guy, explosive in the open field, kind of released a top 6. Where are the Badgers at, do you think, in this top 6 that he released? And what do you think of his game?
Yeah, this is pretty early. He's got a top 6, but I feel like it's still to be explored because he hasn't been to many of the schools on there. I think only Penn State of the top 6 has hosted him to this point. I think Miami's going to get a trip here soon as well because now he's at IMG Academy. But he's originally from West Virginia, just made the move to IMG. So he's a guy, Ryan, where he's still sort of figuring out, what that ceiling looks like when you've got the IMG attachment next to your name. But Wisconsin's interesting on this list because Cincinnati was involved pretty much early in his high school career during his breakout over the last year. Cincinnati got involved, got him on campus, I believe, in October for a game where he was able to sit down with some coaches that are obviously now up at Wisconsin. So once the Badgers offer came in, you knew they were going to be legitimate contenders and possible contenders, and that's exactly where they stand in this top 6. But for a lot of kids, when you drop that, you're progressed and you're kind of further along in your recruitment. I think Jerrae is kind of still a little bit towards the beginning because he does need to get out to some of these places. I think he's been to like BC and Pitt and Cincinnati, a couple schools, but he hasn't been to most of the schools in his top 6. And some of those schools I just mentioned didn't make his top 6 as well. So he's clearly buying into some of these new relationships that he has because a lot of the offers that have recently come in, January, February offers, those are the schools that made the cut, which is why I think Wisconsin's got kind of a sneaky high place within this top 6 because he does have the relationship with multiple Cincinnati coaches that came over with Fickell.
What do you think of his game? He feels like a guy who Phil Longo would love. Like, get him in space, create space, run him out of the slot. Not as much of a fit with the previous Badgers type of an offense.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right there. I mean, he's profiles like a slot, and look, this is legitimate speed. This isn't hey, he's fast for a smaller guy or for a slot receiver. No, he's got 10-4 wheels. I mean, he can really run. He just posted a PR in the 60, which I know isn't as sexy as a 40-yard dash or anything like that, but he's under 7 seconds. That's kind of the mark. If you're under 7 seconds, you're flying. So he's got that to his name. But yeah, I like his game. Two-way guy, played some corner, looks really quick, instinctive on defense in particular, and offensively really productive. 14 touchdowns last year. He can put great route combinations together, and he can accelerate out of those breaks at a very high level. So yeah, I think he profiles as you watch the Super Bowl, your Kadarius Toney type, a guy who is maybe purely a gadget player, if not just a slot and a return man, but he does have some polish to his game. Obviously, when he's at IMG, we'll get a closer look at him and verify some of the height and weight or lack thereof. But you can't teach the speed, and the production he's got to his name as a two-way guy is something that is not to be overlooked. I do think he's got more than just gadget player in his collegiate future. Although, again, that's not something to look down upon as we sort of navigate how we evaluate these players. Being a gadget player is a good thing. It means you're so darn good at one thing that we want to maximize it and manufacture a role within the offense or the defense relative to the player. So I'm a big fan of Hawkins, and I think he's one that is going to have a really big spring before he takes a lot of these visits. So it's good for Wisconsin to already be sort of on the plus side of this recruitment because he's one that could kind of explode here in the next few months.
Yeah, I like that you brought up the fact that gadget players, you don't necessarily need to say that in a negative connotation, right? And especially with the way offense has gone, with the way Wisconsin's trying to transition. Is this something where, again, we're going to continue to see Wisconsin transition into new types of recruits? Not that they've never had a slot receiver before, but with Phil Longo there, with this transition, where are the Badgers going potentially in terms of a top 25 class? We had a couple questions in the chat about, you're seeing a 5-star potential defensive end coming to visit. You're seeing this 4-star slot receiver. And I'll put the chat up here. It's from Daniel Cole. He said Badgers top 25-ish class. Is that the expectation with Luke Fickell and Madison?
Yeah, I think it's starting to get there. Again, this is the first full cycle, so we'll get a truer sample. I do want to, I guess, throw some caution in only because of the transfer portal. We don't know how much in a full cycle this staff is going to evaluate high school recruiting versus the portal, because unfortunately, for all but one of the outlets that measure recruiting classes, it's very much volume and algorithm based. So you've got to have a certain threshold. You got to sign 20 plus players to sort of be in the game for a top 25 class for the most part. So I do think there's a potential element of the portal slowing something like that down. And that's not a bad thing. We're going to start, if not this cycle, very soon, just as an industry, we're going to start putting all that together anyway. But just from a traditional sense, yeah, this is a class that is going to have top 25 potential if the volume sort of lines up, because there's a couple things really working for the Badgers ahead of signing day this year. One, it's exciting. It's new, right? You've got a place that kids want to get to. That's already been confirmed. I think you see more of it when the season actually gets here, and or the on-field product starts off a little stronger than maybe some would expect. And then two, and this is really, I think, increasingly important, you're getting big names on campus. So other big names are going to be like, wait, you went to Wisconsin? What was that like? Kids talk to each other. That's a very underrated and probably still under-talked about element of roster construction and how we view recruiting. Kids talk. I mean, David Stone goes to Wisconsin and likes the official visit. I would almost bet there's going to be more IMG kids, because he's a captain, he's a leader, more IMG kids that say, hey, I just got that offer too. Maybe I'll give him a call. That stuff really does matter once you start to break through and grab some of these elite national names. And then on the other side of it, it's also a great year in the state. We've talked about that on your last few pods with me, Ryan. Your Donovan Harbors, that crew within state lines is really strong relative to precedent and perception in the state of Wisconsin. So you're going to theoretically grab great talent. And then the fourth point here, you've got your QB. We talked about that plenty with Matoyer earlier on the show previously. You've got your QB. He's in Texas. He's going to be spreading the word for Wisconsin on top of all of this. So I do think you see kind of consistently more recruits showing interest and eventually getting up to Madison for visits. And that's obviously, for a school like this is step one in expanding and improving on that recruiting footprint.
That's a phenomenal answer, as always. We're going to take a quick break. Friends of the show, come back. We're going to finish up with we have 4 or 5 comments in the question in the chat over here I want to get to. We're going to throw them at John Garcia. Finish up there. If you have any other questions, anybody listening to the show, throw them in the chat. We'll get to them. We'll get to as much as we can. But let's take a quick break for our friends of the show. And then we're going to get back with John Garcia Jr. All right. Want to thank everybody for tuning into the show. As always, really do appreciate it. I want to start here, John. Like, Wisconsin got, they brought in Mordecai, they brought in Evers, they brought in Locke, they got the 24 kid, Meadower, which we talked about a ton, is incredible treasure trove of quarterback talent, potential talent. Keith Janke comes in and he says, I was more impressed with Cole LaCruz's film when I watched it. Go back to Cole a little bit. He feels like a bit of the forgotten guy here. We've talked about Cole LaCruz a lot. He's been on the show. I guess my impression is he should not be the forgotten guy here necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, the Locked On Badgers podcast loves them some Cole LaCruz, and that's etched in stone. But yeah, this is a great player. I mean, I talked about it plenty here. If he was from another place, a bigger place, he would have a lot more cachet to his name. But he's done all the things you want a quarterback playing lesser competition to do. You want him to dominate, you want him to win and be productive. He has done all of those things and then some. But he's got this game where he's elevating guys. It's sort of all about him at his program, as far as we can tell. Cole is elevating those guys, whether it's his anticipation, his timing, getting his old lineman off the schneid by running around like a madman. He's the guy that helps them elevate their margins. So, yeah, Cole is a gamer. He's athletic. He's tough. He's a guy who has all the production and experience you want at the prep level. He's not to be discounted in this thing post the expected Tanner Mordecai era. he's not to be discounted. And however those quarterback rooms and depth charts start to come out of Madison, especially now with Phil Longo. I mean, you look at some of these North Carolina quarterbacks, they're all mobile. They're all mobile, and that's a necessity in the offense. And it's also a part of the trust that Phil has with the QBs. You saw Sam Howell lowering his shoulder a couple of years ago. You see Drake May running I saw 4 or 5 runs in a row from him. Nobody expected that coming into 2023 there at North Carolina. So he works best with that mobile quarterback who's got some grit. And there's no doubt that if you go to Sam Howell in particular, beyond the arm itself, there's a whole lot of similarities with Cole LaCrue. A little bit smaller, a little grittier, just kind of a gamer. A combination of improv and polish all at the same time. So I'm a big fan of Cole.
And this is from Mitchell Bilak. He said, it's crazy how Lincoln Keenholz blew up from a similar low-key area, but LaCrue didn't, despite both having quality film. I mean, we've talked about LaCrue a lot, but it is kind of interesting. The Badgers were in on both of them. I want to go to this next question here. This is something we touched on very briefly, John, and we'll probably finish on this question because we're running out of time. But this is from Ryan Shaw. He says, it seems inevitable transparency around these NIL deals will eventually happen. Money's legal. Everybody knows every deal. Why would NIL not have that level of transparency?
Yeah, I think that's the goal. I think a lot of the decision makers would love for this to get pushed through. But I think there's a whole lot of mess, for lack of a more sophisticated way to present this. There's a whole lot of mess in between now and that transparency, because you've got different conferences, different states, different rules, different legalities around all of this stuff. And then you've got public schools versus private schools, public collectives versus private businesses and private boosters that are providing some of this NIL funding. So it really becomes hard to track. The schools are doing it, so that it could eventually port over sort of very clearly in principle. But yeah, I think a lot of people want that, but we're pretty far away from that down the line, especially, again, as we still consider everybody student athletes. That's important to note here as well. It's hard to throw anything blanket on this body, this student body itself in college athletics. So as long as it's the NCAA, and heck, that could change sooner rather than later. Mm-hmm. But as long as it's in this light, it's going to take a while for transparency.
And quick follow-up on that, do you think that it would be better for the athletes to have that level of transparency, or does that almost put, a target on the back's the wrong phrasing there, but does that almost in a way set them up for some expectations or potential adversity there?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of changes that help the kids. And that one, I think, would create more of a target on their back, as you said. We haven't gotten to the point where we know about in-house jealousy and kind of the tougher side of young people making a lot of money. But if it gets to that public standpoint, then yeah, I mean, everybody's going to know exactly what CJ Stroud pulled in this past year. So yeah, I do think that's something that could go the other way pretty quickly. But you also understand it. You understand the desire for the public to know about the value, the market value.
Yeah, very well said as always. John Garcia Jr., Locked On's recruiting insider, joining us. We try to get him on once a week. John, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody in the chat, thank you. If you submitted comments offline, thank you. We didn't get to everything, but I'll try to loop back to some of them with John. On Wisconsin, NIT game tonight, basketball. We might go live after that one. We'll have to see how the game goes on Wisconsin, and let's keep it going.